The word Mingja is comprised of Ming, which means pure, clear, and Zhe, which means active observation. When practicing Mingja, we are actually in a state of awareness where our consciousness is aware of itself. If you're as confused now as I am, then you might be wondering, how does that show up in daily life? And this is what today's episode with Cynthia Li is all about. My name is Torsten Lüdecke, and this is the Wisdom Qigong podcast. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wisdom Qigong podcast. My guest today is Cynthia Li, and Cynthia is a very well-known Zhineng Qigong teacher in the community. She's working very closely with Teacher Wei, and she's also the editor of one of his books on the Mingja Awakening. You will find the link in the show notes if you're interested in this book. And when I approached Cynthia, she said, well, why don't we talk about how to integrate Mingja in daily life? And I think, before we start, Cynthia, maybe you will briefly explain what is Mingja actually?
Mingjue is two Chinese characters, right? Ming is like pure, clear. Jue is observation or the act of observing. So, sometimes we paraphrase it by saying it's pure consciousness. It's a state of awareness where your consciousness is aware of itself. And so it's, sometimes I'll explain it as sort of like a meta level of awareness, right? So we can be aware of our surroundings. We can be aware, as Qigong practitioners, we can be aware of our Qi universe, our Qi bodies. And then this is, okay, now we are aware that we are the awareness. So that's Mingjue. Mingjue is the awareness that, observes itself and also is observing and merging with other consciousnesses to really collectively awaken the Qi universe that we live and breathe in.
So why is this so important and so meaningful?
To me personally, or more collectively?
Yes, please.
Me personally, I mean, just by way of background, I am a Western trained medical doctor in California, and came to Zhineng Qigong and then Mingjue, as a more specific practice within Zhineng Qigong, even though it's completely one and the same, but a deeper practice, I guess. I didn't, beyond the movements, beyond the Qi, it took me several years, before I actually understood, the primary practice is consciousness. And why is that so important? Why is it so revolutionary? And I came to Qigong because of very complex autoimmune conditions that I had, was very debilitated. My own field had nothing to offer. And so, like many people, out of desperation, will try anything. So, I began as a rehabilitation exercise. It was very body-based. And then, there's actually more to it. There's subtle realms of Qi. And then came Mingjue. This was about 5 years ago now. And it was a completely different way for me to practice Qigong. And, and as I've gotten to know a lot of people in the community, it's been a game changer for them too. Some people who've been practicing longer than I have. So I would say at least in the theory, which you have also beautifully displayed on your website, in sort of parsing out some of the theories, the teachings, is that there are everything is Qi, and there are 3 levels, of different gradations of subtlety and roughness or density, depending on the framing. And so, first you have the material level, the physical body, the flesh, the cells, the atoms. And then you go to what we would normally call energy or Qi, which is kind of this energy level, right? And then it goes all the way down to the quantum. And then you have the subtlest level, which is information, and consciousness. Our consciousness is resides within this dimension. So it's super, super subtle, but its subtlety means that it permeates everything. And so everything, like, and as a doctor, right, I work with a lot of people who want to heal their health conditions and make their bodies stronger. And so I did not recognize the power of consciousness. So the teaching, right, in Zhineng Qigong is that, yeah, if you change consciousness and consciousness merges with the chi body, it transforms the physical body, right? Sort of inside out, bottom up. And so then you add Mingja collective field, which is another game changer. It's another level where as consciousnesses, as hearts, we can merge, right? Because that energy, that field is so subtle, we merge. We don't merge on the physical level, right? That's when we fuse identities. That's when codependencies happen. All sorts of things happen on that level. But when we merge at the consciousness and heart levels, that wisdom and that, I'll say, the information field that's there, we can bring that into our bodies. And so it's literally like, bringing in, the love and wisdom of Dr. Pang, or Teacher Wei, all the other teachers who've come before us, who are here now, all of our community, and allowing that to harmonize our own energy fields. And so, and as a scientist too, we know now that there are measurable energy fields within our bodies, and these are the denser fields, the electromagnetic fields. And it's usually when we're practicing is when we feel the bodily chi, right? So, but no, all of this information, this conscious information, can help us harmonize those fields. And then when those fields within us are harmonized, our cells, they function optimally. And so healing can happen very, very quickly. And so, it's been interesting for me to try to even begin to understand, how is it that these, quote, miraculous healings happen? How do they happen? And so now I have at least some sense, at least energetically and informationally, how that happens.
I like to come back to one point you just mentioned, because when you said that if you tap into the Mingja and into the collective field, it is that you're connecting with the information and the wisdom, of all the other practitioners and people like Dr. Pang and so on. And I'm just, excited because only today I listened to a podcast about artificial intelligence. And in this podcast, it was pointed out that, for example, if you have what's it called, humanic robot, if one learns something, then automatically everybody else has the same learning. And they pointed out that this is something extraordinary in artificial intelligence, which is beyond human capacity. But really, what you are saying and what a lot of us have already experienced ourselves is that is actually not true. We can basically tap into the same resource by using our consciousness and by using the ENT and by using the Mingja state. So we can actually tap into all this information. And that is the information that we need because in this information field, we have the right a knowledge and wisdom of what it means to be healthy. So if we connect with that, we automatically can go back into a healthy state. Is that correct what I'm saying here?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you bring up AI, and I don't purport to be an AI expert by any means. My understanding, so in Chinese, Xing, the character Xing actually means mind and heart, right? So in Western languages, we've divided those up. They're fragments. And so even saying like sort of heart mind is not quite true, right, to the original essence of that word, and the original essence of that information behind that word. And so but being a body, with a brain, with a heart, my understanding is that what we humans have actually that's different than AI is we have heart intelligence. And so when we connect consciousness, Mingjue, it's we use the term consciousness, but it's a heart to heart connection. And again, we have kind of emerging neuroscience that actually confirms that is that the heart actually sends more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. So the heart and the heart's field is much bigger energetically than the brain's field, at least in humans. And so when we're really connecting Mingjue to Mingjue, my understanding is it's a heart field. And that through the heart, we receive this information, filters up through to the brain. And then, we call that consciousness. So, but really consciousness is the brain heart, right? Together as one. And that's what is different than AI. AI cannot have heart intelligence. It just by design does not. But in terms of mental intelligence, it can be a tremendous tool for elevating consciousness. It can also be incredibly dangerous, right, as well. So it's like any other kind of source of information, right? If we always come back to ourselves, we always connect to our heart, and then um, connect to this massive field that can help stabilize us, and where we're receiving this intuitive information all the time, we can use, right, that information. Mingjue uses the AI information, right, freely, and to enhance itself, to awaken more to itself. So it's a very powerful tool. And what AI can do, right, mentally, human, it's impossible for us to compute that fast. So it is this very interesting time where we're also, I think, really transforming our understanding of what intelligence is, because there's differences between heart and mind intelligence.
And I would, of course, would like to know, because that's where we started the conversation, of where and how you implement this in your daily life. I mean, what does it mean for you when you wake up in the morning and when you go through your day? And yeah, how do you implement that?
Yeah. So, I began very organically. I began this series in our community 2 or 3 years ago, just called, Mingja in Daily Life. And I was working initially with small chi groups. And then it kind of expanded to the US. And then now, it's open to anybody around the world. And it arose because I began to see in my own life, wow, you know what? There's some, and not just for me, but also people around me, right? Some incredible teachers and healers that have been, we've been studying alongside each other for years. And then now there's this new community, and whoa, their Gong Fu is incredible. And, in the Mingja practice, as you know now as well, right? So oftentimes it can put you into a trance state, right? There's different levels of Mingja state and of this peacefulness, of this coherence, of this harmony. And, in a very deep state, you're kind of in a trance, or like a hypnotic state. But you can also be in Mingja state in an deeply observant state in waking ordinary life. It's very different than thinking, right? And so we know that it puts you in a different brainwave state. So, so I knew the science on it, and then I also knew, just as a human being trying to live my life, I'd be like, oh my God, we're in such a great state during practice. And then daily life, relationships and work and, societal stuff, political, all of that. And then it would just kind of just go by the wayside. I was like, wait a minute, where's Mingja here? And right, because just as we were talking about earlier, right, Mingjue information consciousness is that subtle level of information, of energy. And it's so difficult to connect to in a very material, loud, fast, high stimulus environment. So what I began to realize was, if you can imagine like a fork in the road, right, is that we begin to practice, and then our gongfu in our practices becomes so strong, and we're not integrating it, that fork grows wider and wider. So then our practice becomes more of a retreat and an escape, more than a tool for completely transforming our lives and our health, right? So that when I had that realization, I was like, wow, because what I began to experience in my own body was more in the form of resistance. And I could just feel the resistance in daily life. And that became a teacher, right? It was like, okay, Mingjue is there. Who's observing this resistance? Mingjue is observing it. Okay, then Mingjue is here. Mingjue is always here. So I just began to practice and play. The other inspiration, if you'll call it, for Mingja in daily life as a practice was there was a period of time when I was having very intense qi purifications after qi purification, and it was difficult for me to even find a chance to sort of like rebound and recover and live my life. And so Teacher Wei said, okay, why don't you take a break from the dedicated practices, but practice Mingjue awareness in your daily life. So you can just tone it down a little bit, but begin to integrate it. Don't stop. Do lower dantian breathing as you're living your life. Do lower dantian breathing. Right now, you and I are talking. I'm doing lower dantian breathing. After years of training, right? So it's like more and more. Oh, Mingjue became the master of daily life. And it wasn't just about the practice during dedicated sessions. And so it actually transformed my life because it made my life much more playful, right? Every challenge felt like, okay, how's Mingja going to respond to that? As opposed to like, oh my gosh, another health challenge, another relationship difficulty. I mean, what you name it, right? Or whatever's happening on the world stage in America and the world. So it just there was a lightness to my days and a lightness to my relationships. And my health actually has been really, really, remarkably resilient. I mean, I still have blips, and challenges and definitely chi purifications. But I can move through those with so much more flow. So Mingja in daily life is really about recognizing, to your point about AI, whether it's cleaning our toilets, whether it's cooking dinner, whether it's our work, everything is like a playground for Mingja to observe itself, to awaken more to itself, to awaken to the abundance of life.
My name is Torsten Lüdecke, and I have news for you. You can now access our podcasts in a very different way. If you would like to go back to any of the episodes and you just remember a certain topic or you have a certain question, please use our new bot and ask that question. Not only will you get an answer based on all the episodes we have produced before, you will also be able to directly access the very episode at exactly the point your topic and your question was mentioned. Please use this bot and make sure you don't miss out on this wonderful new feature of our podcast. And I think this is such an important point because the moment you said that you felt that the dedicated exercise become an escape rather than a transformational thing that becomes who you are. I thought it immediately hit me because there's so many people, that I dearly love and that are making such an effort with Qigong. But I think this is exactly what's happening to them. That's exactly what's happening. They are kind of becoming dependent nearly on these sessions, on the wisdom of a teacher and stuff, because they are they're separating their daily lives from this experience. And it is like a, I don't want to say drug, but you know what I mean when I said it becomes, right. So, and that is not what you want, because that is not the idea, neither of Zhineng Qigong, nor of the Mingja, nor of any spiritual movement, I suppose. It should not be the escape route. It should be the tool for your everyday life, for how you go through life. And so I think you're really hitting the nail on the head here with your thoughts, with your work, to tackle exactly that question. And if I understand you correctly, I'm trying to summarize a little bit here, because for me, I need to just make sure I follow what you're saying. This is has a lot to do with being aware all day, because no matter what happens, the way you interact with it, the way you deal with it is, you start asking yourself the question, okay, how does Mingja deal with it? Rather than going into the actual mishap or external thing that's happening. But you need an awareness for that in order to react from that point of Mingja, rather than react from our beliefs or frame of reference or whatever we usually would take when we go through your daily life. Is that so?
Yes. And yes. And what I would clarify is that, when we think like, oh, how would Mingjue respond? That's already our thinking mind, right? That's not Mingjue. So I just wanted to make that point, because it's very easy for our thinking minds to think that we're doing Mingjue, but Mingjue is first and foremost a practice of observation. So it's like we retract back to the center of our heads, the Shenji Palace, and we observe from that place. So there has to be a pause. There has to be a pause to observe, right? And then Mingjue uses, right, the reference framework, including our sensory organs, including what we're seeing, to then, okay, how do we interact, right, with reality, with our lives? And so what I do in these workshops is again, they're just playful experiments, but I will we'll just say, okay, hey, you know what? We're going to invite people into a lower dantian breathing, or it's usually correlated with whatever teacher way is teaching, right? So maybe it's making the sound, maybe it's the shu sound. It varies. And so, okay, very, very brief practice, right? Because I'm like, okay, we're in daily life. Like, this is not a 15-minute field setting thing. So, okay, come into this place. You've been practicing. You can come back to yourself in a very, very, shorter and shorter time, right? And then we will play with either the surroundings of their room, experiencing, how do you experience it? How do you observe it as a qi, right? Room and all the empty spaces around you teeming with qi. It's not just air. It's not just negative space. It's positive space teeming with qi, teeming with love information, right? And how does that transform your experience just walking around your room? So it can be something like that, or I use images. And so the images can be challenging, right? So we're practicing, let's say, La Qi, right? We're doing La Qi and connecting to our breath. Mingjue is practicing La Qi. And then there'll be an image of like a scene of nature, right? And so, okay, oh yeah, okay, this is good. I got it, and then kind of incrementally increasing the senses, right? So, okay, we're going to introduce some movement. And so there's a video of someone walking through nature, and then, okay, maybe we're going to add sound, there's birds flying, and chirping. And just, as you increase the sensory fullness of that, it's easier and easier, right, to lose Mingjue, because we lose ourselves. And so there's an incremental practice where okay, oh wow, I really lost myself there. And then there's like images that are challenging, right? It's like a doctor on a video conference who's talking to you, right? A lot of people get triggered by that, but it's like, hey, first off, and I always say, if anything's really, really triggering, like just close your eyes, come back to yourself, right? But this is an incremental practice and it's safe, and we're collectively practicing. So you're aware that you're not just doing it by yourself. And right. And this is how we practice for real life. Like, oh, this is hard. If this is hard, you keep practicing here. Because then when you go into your doctor's actual office, you're going to be much more rehearsed and prepared. Mingjue has been practicing and training for this. And then there are also things that are really pleasant, like puppies and like, you know, um, children playing and things that we love, right? So observing our attachments, right, to that. Can we observe them as chi realities, losing the form, losing the identity, staying centered, with la chi or lower dantian breathing. And so we begin to just literally, right, with the interfaces of life, of daily life, of a messy living room, it can be any of those things while we are practicing. And then while it's in a safe space, and then we incrementally go. And so like the incremental stuff is, is stuff that I've learned from my medical background, right? When we work with people with trauma, is like, oh, you incrementally expose, and in Qigong, right? In Zhineng Qigong, there's that phrase, comfortably challenging. They're talking about the same thing. They're talking about an incremental zone where we do need the challenge. If we're too comfortable, just like in dedicated practice, if we're so comfortable, it's great, but there's not a lot happening in terms of change and healing, right? And growth. So we want to find that sweet spot where it's not so triggering to where, people can't recover and it just becomes like another frozen state. And then yet it's challenging so that we begin to transform those places where we have resistance.
So when I look at what you're offering, is that open to the general public? Regular Zhineng Qigong students, can they just join your session? Okay, great. So if I put your website in the show notes, then people know how to find you. They can connect, they can attend the sessions, participate in your group sessions, and learn more about that and learn these tools. Now, but it's still, if I may say so, it's still a training session.
Oh, it's definitely a training session. It's not a practice session, right? Where like one teacher is guiding the practice. And I say that, I say, I'm your guide and I'm practicing with you. And if we have 50 people, if we have 2 people, like if we have 100 people, there are that many different practices going on, right? Because we all have different areas where we have resistance and we all relate to these images or whatever practice it is differently. And so there's also the feedback at the end is always very rich because it's like, oh, this really triggered me. I was really surprised, just an image of this on a laptop, really triggered me. Or, and the challenges come up a lot, but more and more now it's like the affections. It's like, oh my God, that really got me. I can deal with the challenges, and I know, okay, Mingja, challenge, but oh my God, my attachments to the things I love, and what do I do with that? Why do we need to let that go? And it's like, we don't need to let it go. It's not that it's quote bad. It's the attachment to it, the strong emotional attachment, again, blocks flow, right? It blocks openness. It creates resistance because we don't want to let go. So in fact, the paradox is if we can let that go, we actually love more unconditionally, right? We don't have fear. We don't have grief, any of these, anger, whatever it is. And so we can experience any of those emotions as well, but in a very flowing state, right? So if the anger comes up, it just flows right out. Grief flows right out. So none of them become contracted energies. They're just flowing. And so the experience of being human actually becomes much more abundant. Some people have this, they say, whoa, we kind of become, again, robots, we kind of become emotionless. I was like, no, it's actually the opposite. It's the opposite. And the difference is that we're not enslaved by these emotions, right? We're not enslaved by these attachments to identity. So we become in a very, very free relationship. And again, it's another way to say it is just Mingja relationships. how do we relate to our symptoms, our health, our body? How do we relate to our world, the people in it? So it's really like, how do we relate to our emotions? So in just much more freedom, much more play. And so what I've really appreciated, about this course with Teacher Wei and the field is, and really how it's transformed my life, is this playfulness. It's like, people think, oh my God, Mingja, oh, consciousness, spirituality and awakening. And there's just a joy. There's a real joy to it. And so that's the Mingja joy, right? That's free from, there's no reason for the joy. It's just joy.
Yeah.
Joy for the sake of joy for the sake of being alive. So it's really just my, that workshop is just a small offering, but it's a way that I get to play, that I get to, my Mingjue gets to continue to evolve as well, together with everyone else's. And so it's powerful for me to see how people are using these tools to awaken.
That was I think it's a beautiful offering that you're having there. And I also want to thank you for all the beautiful words that you've shared with us today. I think it has greatly shed some insights into what does Zhineng Qigong really mean, and what does it mean to overcome the actual trailing setting and go into your real life and be that person that we actually are. And I think the work that you're doing there is fantastic. And I want to thank you for the contribution in the podcast as well. And I hope that many, many people have been inspired by what you had to say.
Thank you. And the gratitude goes both ways. And I'm so grateful for your being and doing in the world.
We trust you enjoyed this conversation, and we invite you to subscribe to our podcast so we can stay in touch and notify you of future episodes. We will end today's episode with the 8 verses meditation performed by Zhineng Qigong teacher Katrin Hendricks. Enjoy. To get your free ebook on the 8 verses meditation, please check the show notes below.